Hello, and welcome to this slightly odd episode of the Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Robert Crighton, and today we're looking at the device of the pageant born before Wolstan Dixie for his Lord Mayor's show on the 29th of October, 1585. It's the earliest, properly-ish extant Lord Mayor's show we have, and it was written by George Peele, but it's still mostly absent. We have, on top of the text that was printed in 1585, an eyewitness account. Unfortunately, Lupold von Wedel didn't really describe much of what went on in the shows themselves. So, we've pulled most of the direct sources together and created this little audio project, where the show is treated like a modern Lord Mayor's show with a live commentary on the radio. It isn't perfect. It's been recorded in many different ways over the last few years, in between recording other things, and so it's more the idea of what I wanted to do. But it is hopefully enjoyable and moderately educational, and gives, which is my primary aim, a sense of occasion for the show. Intercut with the show is some commentary from our special guest.
I'm Dr. Annaliese Connolly, and I am Senior Lecturer in English Literature at Sheffield Hallam University, and I am a specialist in Renaissance literature and specifically drama of the 1580s, 1590s, and particularly George Peele.
Dr. Annaliese Connolly, who is working on an edition of the 1585 Pageant, will go into some of the knowns and unknowns about the text and some of the themes in the writing. Additionally, at the end of the show, you have from our YouTube archive our first look read-through of the text with our regular city chronologer, Professor Tracey Hill, and other readers, to help to be completist about all our work. So, let us go back to our playful look at the 1585 Lord Mayor's show, inaugurating Sir Wolstan Dixie. This is the device of the pageant, written by George Peele. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the inauguration celebrations for the Lord Mayor of London on today, the 29th of October, in the year of our Lord, 1585. The incoming Lord Mayor, Wolstan Dixie, and his procession are in the Guildhall now, preparing to march down to the river. I believe he's been there since quite early, Joan.
Yes, John. The procession from the Guildhall here in the heart of London takes some time to assemble. The members of the livery company, that's the worshipful company of the Skinners, would have begun gathering around 6 in the morning, arranging themselves in order of importance. So, the younger members will be arranged first, with the ranks becoming more senior until we reach the ranks of the Recorder of London and the Lord Mayor himself, bringing up the rear. All we're waiting for now, John, is the sounding of the trumpets, which will announce the entrance of Wolstan Dixie.
And quite a moment that is, Joan. The trumpeters of the city waits, letting rip. Until he appears, they are to remain silent. Yesterday, the new Lord Mayor was formally chosen, and our roving foreign correspondent, Lupold von Wedel, was there for the ceremony. Lupold, you've been keeping an eye on the world of politics and state the last few days, yes?
Oh, yes, John. The day before, on the 27th, I was in Parliament. Parliament being assembled in London. And I went to the House, which is a pretty large palace.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I saw the Lord Chancellor and the other gentlemen sitting in council, which looks very stately. For all of them, when they go to Parliament or when they sit in council with others of their kin, they wear their old-fashioned coats which hang down to the ground.
Yes, Lupold, but about the ceremony for choosing the Lord Mayor.
Oh, yes. So, on the 28th, being the day of St. Simon and Judah, a new mayor, or burgomaster, was chosen. This ceremony takes place every year on the same day and in the following manner. The mayor in office goes to the town hall, followed by the new candidate. They both wear long coats of a brownish violet-colored cloth, lined with marten.
Sorry, Martin?
Pine marten, a red hue. And over these other coats of the same color, faced with calabar skins. The latter hanging down on the back and turned up on the sides. On their heads they wear black caps, and a scepter and sword were carried before them.
Ah, now this is a ceremony that...
After them marched 24 councillors clad in the same manner, and in the town hall stood 48 men, 24 on each side, in long black coats also lined with marten, wearing on their backs large bags like those which in Germany the shepherds use, of cloth half red, half black. When the council has reached the platform, the present burgomaster and the one which is to come are seated behind a small table, and then the mace bearer advises 3 times all present to pay attention.
Sorry, how many times?
3 times. 3 times, yeah. Then he takes a book, and he and another gentleman, kneeling down on cushions placed both sides of the table, read the oath which the new mayor has to swear. When this is done, a book bound in red velvet with gilt edges is handed by another person, together with the seal, sword and scepter, to the new mayor. Ah, wunderbar.
So, this is a fairly secret event. This isn't the public ceremony.
After this ceremony, they all go out again. But now, the late mayor following the newly elected. But before going out, the 2 mayors and the council had taken off their overcoats faced with calabar, keeping on only those lined with marten, over which they had large golden chains hanging down in front and on the back as far as the girdle.
Large golden chains, Wedel?
Ah, yes. The Queen gives such a chain to every new elected burgomaster. The members of the town council, who have been elected mayors once before, wear likewise such chains. The others have only stripes of black velvet on their coats, about a handbreadth broad.
Yes, but is there anything about...
The 2 mayors, as well as the council, left on horseback. Also 2 secretaries who rode behind the council. They were clad in similar clothes as before said, wearing golden chains beneath their coats. The men with the coloured bags, hoods, marched before and accompanied the new mayor to his house.
Oh, I'm going to have to cut you off there, Lupold, as the new Lord Mayor has appeared and the procession is about to start. We'll return to Lupold when he's at Westminster.
Oh, yes indeed, John.
Now the mayor, with the members of the council, are leaving the Guildhall and processing down to the River Thames. Once there, they'll be travelling on the barges to Westminster and to the courts of law. There they are now. The crowds are gathered along the route as they march past. Oh, such a crowd gathering, and look at all of the various different members of the livery company marching along there. Oh, men, as von Wedel mentioned earlier, men with the coloured hoods he'd seen yesterday, all present. These are the masters of the different companies. Oh, what a sight it is, Joan!
Yes, John. Having processed down from the Guildhall, passing with the great conduit to their left, down Soper Lane, they're now coming towards the embarkation point at 3 Cranes. They're approaching the mayoral barge now. It's covered in red taffeta. That's silk taffeta, very expensive luxury fabric, beautiful when the light hits it, ornamented with a white cross. White on red. There's a lot of anticipation at this moment. As the trumpets beforehand heralded the appearance of the mayor, here are some very different instruments to salute his embarkation. And with that great peal of gunshot, the mayor has stepped onto the barge. That was a salute of more than 100 pieces of ordnance. The trumpeters and other musicians continue to play on all the barges. The spectacle does not stop for a moment. even as the mayor's barge makes its way to Westminster.
Ah, thank you, Joan. The mayoral barge is followed by the barges of the various livery companies of the city, filled with mechanics or members of each company. Each company has its own barge, of course, ornamented with numerous flags by which each company might be distinguished one from the other. Now, passing now the distinctive apprentices' barge, very large, painted black and white, and uncovered. Besides these, on the river are numerous little boats. Look at them all together, several hundred in number, carrying an excited crowd of Londoners who want to see this splendid spectacle all the way to Westminster.
In 1585, partly because it's the first extant show that we've got, and we start to see the way in which his show is used as a template, not only by subsequent writers who are writing for the Skinners Company. So 1585 show, Pageant born before Wolstan Dixie, so Dixie belongs to the Skinners Company. We see how they are keen to advertise that, the Skinners, and celebrate them. Obviously, Peele's is not the first show, it's the first one that we've got printed. But we can see from subsequent shows going forward that this becomes a kind of motif. And the interesting thing about the shows for me is how repetition is not a bad thing. That there's a kind of template format, and each year it's drawn upon, it's reused with slight tweaks. But it's that idea that it's not got to be something brand new every year, or, every time it's a Skinner's show. So they're kind of adapting these images as they go along. George Peele, and here he is following in his father's footsteps. We've got a family tradition of the Peels being involved in pageant making, putting on the Lord Mayor's show. So his father, James Peele, is involved in the 1560s with at least 2 shows. We've got records and entries for him putting on shows. Unfortunately, again, those texts of those shows have not survived, but we have got records of his involvement with the Ironmongers Company, putting on shows for them. We've got 2 extant shows. We've got 1585 for Wolstan Dixie, and we've also got 1591 for William Webb, and he gives that a fancy name. He calls it Descensus Astrea, and that's one of the first shows that's given its own name or title, if you like. The others are always the device of the pageant born before whichever Lord Mayor it was. I think George Peele is a man who is trained, or has a lot of experience of writing speeches for delivery in a very busy, noisy public space, not just for commercial theatres. He does go on to write, obviously, plays, but his training very early on is for writing speeches for Lord Mayor shows. And he's also in the 1580s also writing shows for other kinds of civic entertainment. We know he can turn his hand to a good speech, and also it seems like his role is more than just speech writing, that he is also trained in the kind of putting together of these shows and how they're kind of slotted together and organised.
There's been great rejoicing on the river as far as Westminster. For those who've just joined us, we've just watched as the new Lord Mayor, Wolstan Dixie, has left his barge, and a procession has marched before him, headed by the men of the city and the trumpeters of the city waits. After these followed more than 200 men and the sergeants, each of the latter bearing in his hand the Queen's arms in the form of a seal, but broader.
Yes, indeed, and there's an amusing little fact about these, John.
Oh, yes?
Everybody whom the sergeants touch with the seal must follow them upon pain of death.
Yes. Well, the crowd doesn't need encouragement to follow this procession.
Indeed not, John. The numbers we're seeing today are quite fantastic. Behind the sergeants there follow a good number of men with white staffs. There are 16 trumpeters in this procession and 4 pipers. After these, 2 men each bearing an incense box on a white staff. A pleasant sense for the crowd, but let's hope these brass and woodwind players don't get smoke in their lungs. Then, behind them there, you can just see him comes the man with the sword. He's wearing a broad and high open cap of fur. Not sure what kind of fur that is. Back to you, John.
The procession has gone into Westminster now for the official ceremony. We're going on to Lupold von Wedel, who should be there now. Lupold?
I can hardly hear you. The hall is so crowded.
Can you describe that scene from earlier as the procession reached Westminster?
No, I can't hear you, so I'll just tell you about the procession. After they alighted at Westminster was the procession following the two mayors. There were the council members in the same order as I described from yesterday, but they're now in red coats. The two burgomasters were clad in the same coats. Then followed 70 men with spears, clad at the expense of the burgomaster in blue coats and broad red caps, all of the same pattern, according to the English fashion. Now, what seems like the whole population entered the courthouse in a crowd, men as well as women. For the English women want to be present on all such occasions.
Lupold?
Though the place is very large, there is no possibility to move.
Can you describe the ceremony?
Yes, the burgomaster and the council mounted some steps and swore the oath to the Chancellor of State, who acted as the Queen's deputy. When this was over, I and my companions left the place. It was just too crowded. I couldn't see a thing.
Thank you, Lupold. In a moment, the procession will return by barge to Paul's, where the hotly anticipated pageant will be performed. And hopefully, Lupold will be able to tell us a little bit about that.
We know that there are first-hand accounts of these Lord Mayor's shows, certainly the one for 1585. We've got the German traveller, tourist von Wedel, who comes to London as part of a tour of Europe. He goes to London, he also goes to Scotland and then comes back again. He gives an account of the Lord Mayor's show. Unfortunately and frustratingly for us, he doesn't tend to tell us very much about the show itself as put together by Peele. It's very much about the processions and who is attending on the Lord Mayor, what they're wearing, what they go on to eat at the Guildhall, what's happening in the kitchen. It seems to be quite, he's very interested in the kind of the material nature of the show, which actually I think works quite well with some of the things that are interesting about Peele's Pageant.
And for those joining us, the new Lord Mayor, Wolstan Dixie, has taken his oath of office at the Exchequer at Westminster before representatives of the City and the Crown. Both the outgoing and the incoming Lord Mayor, the Recorder of London, and a host of other dignitaries and spectators witnessed and participated in the event. Now, having returned from Westminster, the procession has disembarked at Paul's Stairs, just slightly south of St Paul's, and they've made their way to St Paul's Churchyard and Cheapside for the device of the pageant by George Peele.
Yes, indeed, George Peele, a familiar figure to our London listeners who, if you're a theatre goer, you'll have likely seen one of his many plays, also has something of a reputation as a sometimes controversial prankster. George Peele was commissioned to create the pageant that we'll see today, and it is quite a sight to see, John.
Yes, Joan.
Before the mayor is an actor apparelled like a Moor. Interesting choice there by George Peele, and he is riding on a luzern, or lynx. For the listeners at home, this is a giant cat.
A giant cat.
An ingeniously designed model of a giant cat with the actor riding on its back, opposite the main pageant awaiting the arrival of the Lord Mayor.
Interested in obviously that opening speech. What a great opening, those sort of first 53 lines, a speech spoken by him that rid on a luzern before the pageant apparelled like a Moor. I mean, that's a great set of information there, kind of stage direction, but also because we've only got very sketchy kind of eyewitness accounts of what the show looked like, we get quite a lot of clues there, and we can start to fill in, I think, from subsequent shows, the way in which these shows were being put together, and it's encapsulated in that direction. So we've got a Moor riding on the back of a luzern, which is a lynx. And there are a series of shows that come after Peele's in which luzerns feature very heavily. Lynx has become a stage prop that's going to be used again and again as a kind of way of advertising the company. We've got some really good images in subsequent shows. If we just zoom forward in time, we can look at Thomas Dekker, Britannia's Honour, from a little bit later on, so I think it's 1628, on the title page of that show, we've got an image of the coat of arms of the Skinners Company with the luzern there on the crest, but also on the side. And we also get in Thomas Middleton's show a bit later on another account of a triumph which includes luzerns. I think it's in the Triumphs of Love and Antiquity. We get a chariot drawn by two luzerns, and it's got two luzerns, and it's been rid by two antics who dance to a drum. So we've got lots of detail from subsequent shows about how we've got these kinds of props and what they're being used to do to, as I say, advertise Skinner's Company.
Oh, and I've just heard that our reporter on the ground, Lupold von Wedel, is in the crowd now. What can you see, Lupold?
I'm standing in the East Chip, the broadest street in London, through which the mayor is passing on horseback. The procession marching before him, but at the head of it there are some fire engines ornamented with garlands, out of which they throw water on the crowd, forcing it to give way. For the streets are quite filled with people.
That's quite extreme. Are you sure you're not exaggerating?
Maybe.
Now, can you see the pageant commissioned specially for this occasion?
There comes a person sitting on a fine horse, head, neck, and body being covered amidst the blue taffetas.
And what about the actor sitting on the giant cat?
There follows 7 flag bearers. 2 flags are long, 5 almost like standards, though of a somewhat different cat. And after them, a military banner, followed by some trumpet.
Thank you, Lupold. We can see the pageant now from our commentary box.
Yes.
The actor representing a Moor, let's hope that's a tribute to the multicultural nature of London and not a spot of exoticization by George Peele, lying upon a luzern, that's a lynx, that's a cat, not a real cat, a pretend cat, is before the pageant, upon which a figure representing London sits in a throne surrounded by her...
That idea of being apparelled like a Moor, it's really putting that focus on the performative nature of the pageant and what is this person who is personating a Moor, what are they wearing? And the fact that it is described that he is like a Moor underlines the fact that it's a performance, that this is a costume that's being worn and perhaps cosmetics that have been applied in order to personate a particular racial identity. And thinking about this Moorishness, what might that involve and what might that look like? Traditionally, we've thought about Moors on commercial stages and that use of cork, blackened cork, and using to achieve blackface. There are lots of records about other ways in which black skin was personated, so including records from court masks where there were payments for black gloves, goatskin gloves or velvet gloves for Moors, and also what were called sort of material for limbs, again, a kind of silk or kind of gauzy material that was used to kind of cover the arms and limbs to replicate or attempt to imitate a kind of or create a black skin. And so I think that's quite interesting because, with this idea of being apparelled like a Moor, it opens up, I think, a number of ways of thinking about how that was achieved, whether it was just through blackface or whether there was a particular kind of costuming that was going on.
A cat, not a real cat, a pretend cat, is before the pageant, upon which a figure representing London sits in a throne surrounded by her various defenders. This opening speech will lay out how the figures around London will honour her and how they all honour God and the Queen.
So yes, listeners at home, everything is going to get a little allegorical now. That's the technical term I believe we're using today.
Yes, when you have a personified figure representing an abstract concept, that is indeed an allegory, John.
Yes, so the allegory of London and various other figures speaking to them.
He's about to speak now.
From where the sun doth settle in his wane, and yokes his horses to his fiery cart, and in his way gives life to Ceres corn, even from the parching zone, behold I come. A stranger, strangely mounted as you see, seated upon a lusty luzern's back, and offer to your honour, good my lord, this emblem thus in show significant. Lo, lovely London, rich and fortunate, famed through the world for peace and happiness, is here advanced and set in highest seat, beautified through as our state requires. First, over her, a princely trophy stands, of beaten gold, a rich and royal arms, whereto this London evermore bequeaths service of honour and of loyalty. Her props are well-advised magistrates, that carefully attend her person still. The honest franklin and the husbandman lay down his sacks of corn at London's feet, and bring such presents as the country yields. The pleasant Thames, a sweet and dainty nymph, for London's good conveys with gentle stream and safe and easy passage what she can, and keeps her leaping fishes in her lap. The soldier and the sailor, frankly both for London's aid, are all in readiness to venture and to fight by land and sea. And this thrice reverend honourable Dame Science, the sap of every commonwealth, surnamed mechanical or liberal, is vowed to honour London with her skill. And London, by these friends so happy made, first thanks her God, the author of her peace, and next, with humble gesture as becomes, in meek and lowly manner, does she yield herself, her wealth, with heart and willingness, unto the person of her gracious Queen, Elizabeth, renowned through the world, stored and anointed by the highest power, the God of kings, that with his holy hand hath long defended her and her England. This now remains, right honourable lord, that carefully you do attend and keep this lovely lady, rich and beautiful, the jewel wherewithal your sovereign queen hath put your honour lovingly in trust, that you may add to London's dignity, and London's dignity may add to yours, that worthily you may be counted one among the number of many more careful lieutenants, careful magistrates for London's welfare and her worthiness.
And that was the opening address, probably spoken by an adult actor, quite difficult to see from here, looks small but could just be far away, explaining the pageant of the children. Now, the main body of the pageant, arranged upon which are a number of children.
They're super cute, John.
Yes, it's quite a wonderful sight to all those wonderful child performers there.
Those opening 53 lines delivered by this Moorish character. We've got blank verse being used here. So he's kind of demonstrating his dexterity with different kinds of verse in this show. We've got lots of classical imagery in that opening set of lines. We've got that reference to Myth of Apollo. So this is kind of elevated language. We've got him, I think, his eye on a number of audiences, not only the audience on the street and the Lord Mayor, but also, I think, an audience in print. So people that might want to go on and read this after the event perhaps as a memento, but also that idea of the shows as a literary text, as a text to be read, studied and appreciated. The figure of the Moor here contrasts quite significantly with the way in which Moors are being developed on the commercial stage. If you put this alongside, for example, Peele's play The Battle of Alcazar, we get a very different kind of Moorish character. We've got this figure almost of the noble Moor delivering this very elevated speech in blank verse and celebrating London, and is a symbol, I think, of the commercial mercantile ambitions of the Skinners Company, that they are operating on an international stage, and therefore they're using the Moor as a way of signalling that. The Moor here is being used to symbolise lots of attributes that are desirable, and that contrasts, I think, with the kinds of purpose that a Moor is being put to in plays like The Battle of Alcazar, or other plays by other dramatists of the period, where they are wicked. They are a shorthand method of describing a kind of wickedness associated with blackness and also with race. The other key prop that I think we've got in this play, apart from the very glamorous luzern, is also this reference to corn. Now, this seems to give a very idealised image of England. Here we've got London and England, and it's ruled over by Elizabeth. And isn't she a wonderful queen? And isn't everything hunky-dory and everything is rosy? I think the reference to corn, which seems to come throughout, underlines that reciprocal relationship between London and the countryside. And that's why we get, in the pageant itself, we get London, and then we get a series of allegorical characters. And it's an opportunity to look at the way in which the countryside supplies London with all its needs, but specifically corn. Now, on the surface, everything is hunky-dory, but I think if we look at 1585, I think there is an undertow of anxiety around food and security and what's going on at a national level. So we just go back to what the Moor is saying in that opening speech. The God of kings that with his holy hand hath long defended her in England. So there is this sense in which, she's being defended by God. And this is in a slow build-up to invasion threats by Catholic Spain. So we've got this kind of feeling that we need to keep saying that she's a providential monarch and everything's all right because God's on our side. And we've got all these people who are contributing to English society and keeping everything running. But, I think there is some tension there, and I think context is everything with these shows.
It's quite a wonderful sight to all those wonderful child performers there. It's quite an elaborate stage that they're arranged upon. Probably they're children performers simply because of the amount of room they have and the size of the sets available, that children are quite important.
Not to mention the amount of weight that the structure can bear, John.
Absolutely. At the top of the construction, speaking first, is the personification of London. London is seated in a high throne.
New Troy I hight, whom Lud my lord surnamed. London, the glory of the western side. Throughout the world is lovely London famed, so far as any sea comes in with tide, whose peace and calm under her royal queen hath long been such as like was never seen. Then let me live to carol of her name, that she may ever live and never die. Her sacred shrine set in the house of fame, consecrate to eternal memory. My peerless mistress, sovereign of my peace, long may she joy with honour's great increase.
That was London, performed by one of the boys of St. Paul's, and quite a cheeky little fellow.
We've got London here and Elizabeth. We've got London personified, and it's being, I think, idealised and celebrated. And we've got implicit stage directions. It talks about how London is seated in the show, and we might want to think about how this was kind of put together on a platform, kind of house-shaped structure, where we might have London at the top and then these other allegorical characters underneath. I think, again, it's one of the Anthony Munday shows. There is, again, a reference to a structure where there's a figure at the top, like London, and then these other allegorical figures underneath. So that seems to becomes a kind of tradition, if you like, or a go-to arrangement.
Now, arranged below London are various figures who will honour her. First, the personifications of magnanimity and loyalty, important traits, followed by the country and the Thames itself.
The country and the Thames afford their aid, and careful magistrates their care attend. All English hearts are glad and well apaid, in readiness their London to defend. Defend them, Lord, and these fair nymphs likewise, that ever they may do this sacrifice.
The greatest treasure that a prince can have, doth lovely London offer to her queen. Such loyalty as like was never seen, and such as any English heart can crave.
For London's aid, the country gives supply of needful things and store of every grain. London, give thanks to him that sits on high, had never town less cause for to complain, and love and serve the sovereign of thy peace, under whose reign thou hast this rich increase.
With silver glide my pleasant streams do run, where leaping fishes play betwixt the shores. This gracious good hath God and kind begun, for London's use with help of sails and oars. London, rejoice, and give thy God the praise, for her whose highness lengths thy happy days.
And the crowd is obviously quite taken with the device of the leaping fishes, showing the bounty of the Thames, central figure in this event, with the sounds of the barges still heard in the background. I mean, it's quite difficult to hear what some of these children are saying.
It's quite a celebration, John. That's true.
This middle section, we look at them, their loyalty, magnanimity. We've got this emphasis on peace. That's kind of repeated all the time. You know, Elizabeth, her reign is characterised by peace. If we say it often enough, it'll surely be true, you know, because there's all this other stuff going on, but we're not going to mention it. And all English hearts are glad and well apaid. Are you sure? You know, so there's lots of emphasis on a kind of an idealised image. All those natural resources are being underlined. So we've got the Thames and the fish, we've got the corn, we've got a kind of cross-section of society.
But next on the pageant, coming up now, personifications of a soldier and a sailor. Oh, it's very martial out there.
I do like a nice sailor, John.
Everybody does.
Armour of safe defence the soldier hath, so lovely London carefully attends to keep her sacred sovereign from scath, that all this English land so well defends. And so far London bids her soldiers go, as well may serve to shield this land from woe.
The sailor that in cold and quaking tide the wrathful storms of winter's rage doth bide, with streamers stretched prepares his merry bark, for country's wealth to set his men a-work, that queen and country easily may see, the seaman serves his prince in his degree.
For London's safety and her happiness, the soldier and the sailor may you see all well prepared and put in readiness to do such service as may fitting be, and art with them doth join and they with me. London, then, joy, and let all ages know what duty to thy sovereign thou dost owe.
And that was the personification of science, praising the soldier and the sailor as well as taking some credit for their success.
Again, if we move to the soldier and the sailor, the role of the soldier to defend the state, to defend the queen, and thinking about connections between the shows and the rest of Peele's body of work, that idea of repetition within shows is also a motif across his work, that celebrating the soldier and the sailor is something that comes up in his poetry when he writes a farewell to Norris and Drake in a couple of years' time. He's kind of repeating, you know, these kind of established tropes and images. And again, it's about defense of the realm against the Spanish. So he's found a kind of audience and a kind of set of images. With the soldier, I think there's some implicit stage directions again about what the soldier looks like and how do we know he's a soldier. The opening speech talks about him and also that he's wearing armour. So again, maybe there's some clues there. With the sailor, that emphasis on venturing, not only in defence of the realm, but that idea of merchant venture and also kind of the way in which wealth is being brought in, the methods by which wealth is being brought into the country. Because it says, with streamers stretched, prepares his merry bark for country's wealth to set his men a-work. There's not only defence of the realm, but there's also that idea of perhaps we're a hop and a skip away from privateering. I found science a bit of an odd one. She doesn't get a lot of airtime, science, in the pageant itself, really, because she's really brought on to just continue celebrating the soldier and the sailor. There's not an awful lot about her contribution. That concluding couplet, London, then joy, and let all ages know what duty to thy sovereign thou dost owe. The pageant here, again, there is a shift and a development in the way in which the shows are written and the emphasis. Here, the focus of the show is very much on the monarch and a kind of reciprocal relationship between the monarch and the city of London and its inhabitants. Whereas in later shows, it's very much about celebrating the mayor and the company.
All these verses were written by George Peele, son of James Peele, who also wrote a number of pageants for the city. His son George is the author of a number of plays you may have seen on the London stage and has quite the reputation in the city. Oh, it seems the pageant is drawing to a close now, as 4 nymphs, speaking for London, praise the city, God, and our most princely majesty, Queen Elizabeth.
Thus with the morning sun and evening star, these holy lights shall burn. The cheerful flame with sweetest odour shall perfume as far as India stands, in honour of her name, whose trophy we adore with sacred rites, with sweetest incense and with endless lights.
So long as sun doth lend the world his light, or any grass doth grow upon the ground, with holy flame our torches shall burn bright, and fame shall brew it with golden trumpets sound, the honour of her sacred regiment that claims this honourable monument.
Our holy lights shall burn continually, to signify our duties to her state, whose excellent and princely majesty approves itself to be most fortunate.
Virtue shall witness of her worthiness, and fame shall register her princely deeds. The world shall still pray for her happiness, from whom our peace and quietness proceeds.
And there we can see the arms of England, and underneath inscribed these verses in Latin. Gallia victa dedit flores, invicta leones Anglia, ius belli in flore leone sum, o sic o semper ferat Anglia leta triumphos, inclita gallorum flore leone suo.
Ah, yes, of course. In Latin there, just saying how we, the English, are always going to be lions fighting off those dastardly French.
The French represented there as a flower, beneath the fleur-de-lis, if you will, beneath the English lion.
Ah, yes, and there the traditional English pastimes of insulting the French.
The show concludes, in its printed form at least, with those 4 lines of Latin verse. And these are interesting because these, as far as I can tell, are Peele's own composition. This is not a standard Latin tag that appears with the Royal Coat of Arms. This is something of Peele's own invention. I'll give you a quick summary in rather idiomatic English of what he's saying at this point. He's talking about England and England's coat of arms, and that they have the fleur-de-lis on them, the French fleur-de-lis. It's great that we've got the fleur-de-lis on our coat of arms because it reminds us that we defeated the French. And long may we keep the fleur-de-lis on the English coat of arms. So in brief, that's what it means. And I think it's quite interesting that at the end of this show, or at the end of this printed text of the show, that's what we get. Why does Peele add that in? Why does he compose that little Latin motto? Why is he doing that? And why is he so keen to remind us all that we beat the French? Is he harking back to Agincourt? Because it's not that long ago since we lost Calais. That was our only bit of French territory, and then we lost it. So he's kind of fulfilling that reputation that he has as slightly jingoistic author, that he wants to kind of remind us all the time that we beat the French, we're about to beat the Spanish, we're going to, we're off to war. And here, I think it seems to be, again, a bit of special pleading. Isn't London wonderful? Isn't the Queen wonderful? Aren't we wonderful that we beat the French? It's kind of trying to give people a bit of a boost, I think, in rather a slightly desperate way. The motto itself is interesting because it comes up several times in Peele's other printed works. So 2 other poems, Peele adds this in, not only the lines themselves, but an actual printed image of the royal coat of arms, so that you can see the way in which the fleur-de-lis is quartered with the English lion. And so it becomes a kind of calling card for George Peele. It shows that he can write, he can write great speeches, he can write great poetry, and that he is a kind of company man. He's going to be able to sound the right note about being English and kind of he's going to make these points. So the other poems that this Latin tag appears in is a farewell to Drake and Norris in 1589. They're off to go and fight the Spanish in the Azores. And a bit later on, then in 1593, a poem called The Honour of the Garter for the Earl of Northumberland. He's been inaugurated into the Honour of the Garter, and he commissions a poem from Peele to celebrate that event. And so Peele adds this in to both of those poems. So it's giving a flavour of what's England like, what does it mean to be English at these points in time. And Peele's using this, I think, to kind of give a particular slant to that.
And now the pageant is over. The procession moves on to the Guildhall for the traditional feast, where I believe Lupold is standing by. Over to you, Joan.
Lupold, that was quite a spectacular pageant presentation, wasn't it? Can you describe what you saw?
Well, after the trumpet, some men were carrying a representation in the shape of a house with a pointed roof, painted in blue and golden colors and ornamented with garlands, on which sat some young girls in fine apparel. One holding a book, another a pair of scales, and the third a scepter.
Yes, and what else?
What the others had, I forget. But the rest of the procession, there came the burgomaster and the council on beautiful and well-ornamented horses, with the guard, trumpets and pipes, followed by the multitude. Fine-looking women among it, which was wonderful to be seen.
It's always nice to hear what you think of the ladies, Lupold, but how about the pageant?
I might have skipped the end.
You what?
What?
But
it was so crowded.
But, Lupold...
I'm here in the Guildhall, and the preparations are in full swing. Here, 60 tables are placed, each 15 or 20 paces long, and all well arranged. Some steps higher up, some more tables are arranged in the same manner. And again, a few steps higher behind the curtain, I saw the mayor's table, arranged in a stately manner, where he is to sit amidst the deputies of the Queen and the Council.
But then, depending on where you might stop on the route, you could divide it up so that, maybe when we get to the nymphs, there seems to be some suggestion, and I think this is what Tracey Hill has discussed in elsewhere, is that maybe there is an opportunity for pausing at the standard, for example, when the nymphs are speaking. I'm not sure about the other bits, whereabouts they might fall, but I think you could do that. It says as well that they've got torches. So it's saying our torches shall burn bright, which again, an implicit stage direction, which suggests they're holding torches, which suggests it's nighttime. So maybe it's on that part of the procession back after the feast where they're accompanying the Lord Mayor back to his house. And this is the last bit where they're sort of wishing him good night. So if it's torches, maybe this is that kind of final section. But I mean, I'm just sort of inferring that from the text and also other examples where it seems to be nighttime, so therefore it's later on in the day. It seems to be underlining, I think, as well, the way in which the Queen is sort of set up as this goddess on earth, in which comes up in Peele's later show in 1591, Descensus Astrea. We've got this kind of celebration of her. It doesn't seem to give much room to Wolstan Dixie. There's not much mention of him at all. There's no mention of him at all. And so perhaps that emphasis on the Queen, there's not warning, but there's a kind of an implicit message to him that he's part of sort of serving her, but it doesn't include him at all, really. He's not mentioned. These feel a bit like Vestal Virgins somehow, with all this burning and torches and things like that. It's kind of setting up that kind of image, certainly in the text.
I've been conducted into 2 other rooms, 4 tables being placed in each of them. In the first, I found a great many young ladies dining. In the other, as many married ladies, many of them very fine-looking. After having seen this, I went to the kitchen. In the first kitchen, meat was roasting on 8 fires. and in the second only boiled dishes were prepared. In the third, pastry of many different kinds was made.
Pastries. I like a good pastry, don't you, John?
Always like a good slap-up meal. I particularly like the boiled dishes.
I'll stick to pastries, I think. And this banquet is arranged by the mayor and paid for by him. The expense is said to amount to £500.
Yes, £1 being equal to 5 riksdaler.
Thank you, Lupold. Logicians predict that in 400 years or so, £500 will be worth over 100,000 future pounds.
As long as his office lasts, he is obliged to keep open house and free table for everybody. And this makes a great difference between him and the burgomasters in Germany.
Thank you, Lupold.
He and his wife have the title Milord and Milady as long as they live.
Yes, thank you, Leopold. And with that, we're coming to the end of this live broadcast of the Lord Mayor's Show of 1585. After the banquet, the new Lord Mayor was make his way to St. Paul's Church with his suite, making procession around the church, whilst hymns are sung and candles borne before him, after which they will conduct him with trumpets and music out of the church and home to bed.
I think what's interesting about Peele's work across all the different genres in which he's writing, whether it's Lord Mayor's shows, occasional poetry, whether it's accounts of Accession Day tilts, for all of them, there is this interest in a kind of almost the peripatetic nature of each one of them. Even in the plays for the commercial theatre, there seems to be a thread of kind of a processional nature through all of them. So that's one of the things that links it together. I mean, Tracey Hill has talked about this, certainly with the plays and the shows, but I think it's also there in the poetry, the fact that he becomes known as a safe pair of hands, I think, for writing occasional poetry for big events like the Order of the Garter, Accession Day tilts. He's very good at that kind of thing, and he's very good at writing speeches to order, I think. And I think there is a more integrated approach to be taken with his poetry, plays and the shows. Going back to that image of the royal coat of arms in that opening speech and in the concluding lines of the show or the pageant, it's very much on the royal coat of arms and on the Queen. Later texts of the shows, it's very much about the coat of arms of the company and about the mayor. So we can see that developing. But Peele, to start with, he seems to be doing a lot of heavy lifting in the defence of the Queen, the celebration of the Queen, and again underlining this reciprocal and idealised relationship between the state and the city.
And that's it from our live broadcast outside the Lord Mayor's Show. I've been John, and my co-host Joan.
Yes, and I would like to exhort all our listeners, as is our duty, to pray for the Queen. It's an amen from me, John.
And an amen from me, Joan.
Amen. And good night.
And that was our presentation of the 1585 Lord Mayor's Show, with Heydn McCabe as Lupold von Wedel, Liza Graham as mine host Joan, and myself as mine host John, and our expert testimony from Dr. Annaliese Connolly. Additional voices included Karim Kronfli, Gillian Horgen, Seb Ranson, Liza Graham, David Ault, Geir Madland, Pamela Flanagan, and trumpet work by Matt Beim. It was adapted from sources by Robert Crighton with additional material by Liza Graham. And now over to our exploring session from August 2020, where we pulled the texts around the show apart. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to this exploring session, and today we are looking at some more Lord Mayor's shows. In fact, we are going to the earliest texts of Lord Mayor's shows that we have, as well as some background detail about how they function. We have done one video so far on another Lord Mayor show further down the line in the 17th century, but we're doing 3 from the end of the 16th, and hopefully we'll be filling in lots of interesting details that we hope you will enjoy and will find amusing and innovating as well. We are going to be filling in those details with this wonderful team that we have here, who are going to be reading random selections and also saying hopefully interesting and exciting things as we go. It's been a long day. I feel I'm rambling. So without further ado, reading today we have Alex. Introduce yourself.
I'm Alex Scott-Fairley. I'm an actor and I live in the Highlands of Perthshire in Scotland.
And also reading Liza. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Liza. I'm an actor and I'm in London.
And Tracey, introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Tracey. I'm not an actor and I'm not in London, I wish I was. I'm an academic. I work on civic pageantry and I live in Bath.
There may be. We obviously aren't actually sponsored, I should point out. But Tracey has written a book, Pageantry and Power, a cultural history of the early modern Lord Mayor's show, which is sort of our Bible here. So it's lovely having her on the team. So also, finally, Greg, introduce yourself.
How do I follow that? Hi, I'm Greg. I'm not a professional actor either, and I'm based near Stratford-on-Avon.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton, and I'm now slightly worried that YouTube will treat this as sponsored product video. So we'll see how that pans out in the edit later. So without further ado, we are going to dip into the year, into the 1580s. And we're going to start with a journey through England and Scotland made by Lupold von Wedel in the years 1584 and 1585, or as I've put it in the document, What I Did on My Holidays by Wedel, 44 3/4. Bless his cotton socks. He, as we've just been discussing how German he could be at the time, he's about as German as it gets. He went on holiday, as it were, to London. He then nipped up to Scotland, and then he came back down to London again. And while he was there, he caught the Lord Mayor's show. And that's the first text of which we are going to be leaping to in a moment. And it's rather fun. We're going to start with a few elements that are the days before. I just want to throw in as a little bit of warm-up, as it were. We're going to go paragraph by paragraph as well. When we get into the longer sequences. I feel before we actually talk about Lord Mayor shows, very briefly, Tracey, if you could just give us a very, very brief overview. What is a Lord Mayor show and how does one find one?
Well, these days you hang out in London around about the 9th of November, although possibly not this year. But in our period, the 29th of October, the Feast of St. Simon and St. Jude, or the day after rather, which von Wedel mentions, was the inauguration of the new Lord Mayor of London, who served for a year, elected by his peers, the aldermen. Very, very important figure, both in terms of the government of the city, but also nationally. Had to be a member of the Great 12 Livery Companies, and as the 16th century wore on, it became more and more the case that you had this lavish kind of procession and pageantry and music and fireworks and all that kind of thing, and dramatists started to get involved. So this is where George Peele comes in.
Yes, our first text is from the 1585 pageant is by George Peele, who has a bit of a family relationship with Lord Mayor's shows. Was his father involved? I seem to recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, James Peele. Yeah, he produced some text in the he worked on the shows behind the scenes rather than there are no texts in the 1560s, good old late 1560s. He was the clerk of Christ's Hospital in London and member of the Salters Company, as was George Peele.
Oh,
he wrote a couple of accountancy books.
I'm guessing Christ's Hospital had a fool called John, or they gave sanctuary to a child called John who was an innocent, right? Oh. He was called John in the hospital. He wore or Blue Coat John, because they wore blue coats. And he's one of the fools that Robert Armin writes about in Fool Upon Fool.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. That's interesting. They clearly did some playing. I'm starting to kind of see evidence of them being the boys from Christ Hospital actually coming to Livery Company halls and performing. So there's more work to be done there, definitely. It's not an institution that anyone's paid much attention to in terms of theatre, actually.
Yeah. In Armin's comedy Two Maids of Mortlake, John is actually a character, and then one of the other clowns, who's also played by Armin, disguises himself as John. So Armin plays both John and the other clown disguised as John.
Right, I'm going to make a note.
Do.
And we haven't even started yet.
Lovely.
That's what I like to hear. So we're going to go round the room with this what von Wedel saw in his holidays, but it's a couple of days before the 29th when everything kicks off. So he's been on his holidays. So Alex, could you just read what happened on the 19th?
On the 19th, we returned to London on the river, 21 miles.
Oh, isn't that nice? On the 26th, what happened, Liza?
On the 26th, Ewald Goltze left for home. I remained here during the winter.
Lovely. Tracey, on the 27th, what did he do?
I'm not going to do a German accent. On the 27th, Parliament being assembled in London, I went to the House, which is a pretty large palace. I saw the Lord Chancellor and the other gentlemen sitting in council, which looks very stately for all of them when they go to Parliament, or when they sit in council with others of their kin, wear their old-fashioned coats, which hang down to the ground.
I like descriptions of this kind of thing. The old-fashioned coats.
He likes clothes very much.
Yeah. He's keen on that. So yes, went to the House, which that should be capitalized. I should point out this is a translation from the 19th century. So I think off the top of my head. So I cannot affirm precisely how accurate the translation is of what he says. However, the next day, having had a little look at Parliament, on the 28th, read the first paragraph, would you please, Greg?
On the 28th, being the day of St. Simon and St. Jude, a new mayor or burgomaster was chosen. This ceremony takes place every year on the same day and in the following manner. The mayor in office goes to the town hall, followed by the new candidate. They both wear long coats of a brownish violet coloured cloth, lined with marten, and over those other coats of the same colour, faced with calabar skins, the latter hanging down on the back and turned up on the sides. On their heads they wear black caps, and a sceptre and sword were carried before them.
Alex, take up the thread.
After them marched 24 councillors clad in the same manner, and in the town hall stood 48 men, 24 on each side, in long black coats also lined with marten, wearing on their backs large bags or hoods like those which in Germany the shepherds use, of cloth half red, half black, with a bandolier of the same colours over the shoulder and fastened before the chest. When the council has reached the platform, the present burgomaster and the one which is to come are seated behind a small table, and then the mace-bearer advises 3 times all present to pay attention. Then he takes a book, and he and another gentleman, kneeling down on cushions placed on both sides of the table, they read the oath which the new mayor has to swear. When this is done, a book bound in red velvet with gilt edges is handed by another person, together with the seal, sword, and sceptre, to the new mayor.
And Liza, last paragraph, please.
After this ceremony, they all go out again, but now the late mayor following the newly elected. Before going out, the 2 mayors and council had taken off their overcoats faced with calabar, keeping on only those lined with marten, over which they had large gold chains hanging down in the front and on the back as far as the girdle. The Queen gives such a chain to every new elected burgomaster. The members of the town council who have been elected mayors once before wear likewise such chains. The other have only stripes of black velvet on their coats about a hand's breadth broad. The 2 mayors as well as the council left on horseback, also 2 secretaries who rode behind the council. They were clad in similar coats as before said, wearing golden chains beneath their coats. The men with the coloured bags marched before and accompanied the new mayor to his house.
And there ends the section on the 28th, the day before. There is always an interesting question, as I don't know whether you know the answer to this, Tracey, but are there any obvious errors that we know that he's wrong about, or is he relatively bang on the money? One always...
Well, I was actually going to say, this is a very, very rare description of the ceremony that takes place before the inaugural day. And so... we have very, I mean, obviously we can compare it to what happens nowadays, although it's very, very secretive about that ceremony, actually, the city. But we don't know because it's really unusual. Von Wedel's got this habit of kind of getting himself into the places where things are happening, even if he's not actually supposed to be there. He has a rummage around the kitchens in the Guildhall at some point later on. So yeah, this is very unusual and really interesting account of very much the kind of private ceremony that took place before the big show the next day. I'm just going to share something with you. Oh, you can't do it. Let me just share it. I'll put it on the chat. There's a picture from Lord Mayor's show about 6 years ago, which shows some of the figures that Von Wedel is talking about, because of course nothing's changed. So I'll just stick that up.
Yeah, he is. You're absolutely right. He's absolutely obsessed with costume, isn't he? He's describing everything there. He is a costume scout's dream, really, isn't he? Trying to prep. If you wanted to recreate this, you'll be scouring that for details that are, absolutely fab.
Any minute now, you'll be able to see the sword bearer and the mace bearer, and the sword bearer wearing his hat of squirrel fur. Which Von Wedel, I think, later on gets very puzzled about what the hell he's wearing. But in that respect, nothing has changed.
It's very specific numbers that he's using. I like the fact the mace bearer advises 3 times all present to pay attention. Shut up 3 times. Always wise. They read the oath. Do we have an access to the kind of oaths they would be saying, or has that changed, or is that still available?
I would be very surprised if it's changed.
Excellent. That's
I don't know from my own personal experience, the oaths that you swear when you become a freeman of the city has not changed really. So, and this is much more important. So, yeah.
Excellent. That's something we can look as a resource in the future as well. That I like. Any additional thoughts in the room about what happened the day before?
Can I just ask, when you said that this comes from a translation from the 19th century, does the original still exist, and that's just a later translation, or do we only have it in a translation from later on?
No idea, actually. I just simply, this was the most available resource that I could get to hand.
Really good question.
Because I'd be really interested to read the original if it does exist. I mean, obviously German has changed, so I would struggle with some of it, but I'd be really interested to read the original.
I'll try and find it out, and I'll let Rob know, and he can let you know.
I would really like to compare and contrast, because that would be, that'd be great. Anything else before we go on to the day itself? Describe the day before we actually get to what the script says the day is like.
Can I ask another question, which might be a stupid question? Is there a significance with? I know that Jude is the patron saint of hopeless causes, I think, but is there a significance? It's all I know about St. Jude. Is there a significance that it takes place on that day? That's a religious one, or is it just traditional?
It's definitely traditional. I'm not aware of any, because there were so many feast days. Obviously, the Lord Mayor's been inaugurated on this date from the 12th century. So, when there were a lot more feast days than there were in the 16th century. It's traditional, really. It's also it's timed quite helpfully because the Lord Mayor was elected at Michaelmas, so the end of August. So that gave him a couple of months to prepare.
Right.
Okay, we're going to go into the day itself. I forget where we got to.
I think it was Tracey next.
Tracey next. So we'll probably stop and start every few stanzas, paragraphs. The paragraphs I don't think are original. I think I probably just put them in, so they may not be helpful, but we'll see. But just to break it up again, and as we come to any interesting thoughts about that, obviously, until you compare it with the text of the show itself, we may find discrepancies. I don't know. I've no idea. So, on the 29th, Tracey.
Okay. On the 29th, the said mayor, together with members of the council, proceeded by the river Thames, from the Stalhof to Westminster and to the courts of law. The barge they used was covered with red taffetas ornamented with the red white cross. It was followed by many barges filled with mechanics or members of guilds. The men with the coloured hoods that I had seen yesterday were also present. They were the masters of different guilds. Each guild or company had its own barge, ornamented by numerous flags by which each company might be distinguished one from the other.
Greg.
A very large barge, painted black and white, was called the apprentice's barge. This barge is uncovered. Besides these, on the river were numerous little boats, although several hundred in number, altogether several hundred in number, carrying people who wanted to see the splendid spectacle. When the mayor stepped into the barge, a salute of more than 100 shots was fired, trumpets and musical instruments were heard from all the barges, and there was great rejoicing on the river as far as Westminster. When the mayor left the barge, a procession marched before him, headed by the men bearing the coloured hoods, and some trumpeters. After these followed more than 200 men and the sergeants, each of the latter bearing in his hand the Queen's arms in the form of a seal, but broader.
So we'll just briefly stop there. So I think in the text of it says Stalhof. Is that Guildhall? I'm assuming that's because that's where they usually start. So they usually start at the Guildhall. They head down to the river, get on the barges, and off they go. More than 100 shots were fired. Trumpets, musical instruments were heard from all the barges. This is noisy stuff, people.
I'm thinking of the Queen. I can't remember what happens on the mayor's one, but I remember the Queen's river procession a few years ago. I'm thinking that was noisy enough.
Yeah,
they had cannons going off from Lambeth on the other side of the river as well.
Wow.
So yeah, and there was the galley foist was a kind of smaller, more sort of movable boat than the barges, and that had musicians and cannon on it as well. So in the river there was also, and the barges had musicians too. So yeah, it would have been absolute mayhem. But in a good way.
I like the very large barge painted black and white was called the apprentice's barge. It's what was the other bit that the various guilds having a different barge. What was the bit that leapt out at me? Thoughts from other people while I try and figure out what the hell I'm saying. Who wants to leap in? No, nobody's got anything. That's fine.
I'm trying to find a picture of a livery company banner actually, because I've got one. But I'll just stick on the thingy so you can all see it.
I like the idea of spectators in their own little boats. I guess the watermen must have done a brisk business on the day.
Yeah, they will have done, absolutely.
Probably had to book a waterman ages in advance. Then if you actually wanted to get anywhere by water, you can't, because they're all down at the show.
Yeah.
So people made a lot of money out hiring out windows if they lived on the route, houses on the route. So yeah, same applies to the river, I'm sure.
It's amazing. He's painted with very few words. He's painted the most vivid picture already of this, with that image of the boats. Even just the boats idea, you think, wow, yeah.
And we haven't even got the text that we'll be looking at in a moment. It's that question. It's a weird translation question, presumably about the coloured bags or hoods. I'm assuming it means hoods, but he wrote bags. Is that? I'm slightly confused by that point.
I guess that is a bit of a weird one actually, but yeah, I think so. It must be that. Martin, by the way, is pine martin or foins, which is the fine for the kind of the higher level members of the companies wore.
They're sort of reddish, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, if you were kind of a bog standard member of the company, you had to wear budge, which is basically sheep's wool.
So all of the clothing he described the day before, is that still the sort of the same sort of outfits for this day as well?
Yeah, if you look at the picture I put up of the contemporary show, not the one I just put up as the banner from one of the companies, but the one before that, you can see that the costumes and the kind of the accessories and so on are really very much the same.
Okay. Right. Okay. We're going to go to the next paragraph. We've just had. They've just got back off the boat. They've headed off to Westminster for the official business of the day. Have they come back from Westminster, or is this the bit at Westminster? I don't know how he's following. You see, I'm quite curious where he is in this whole melee of things.
I think they're on the way down, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we still are on the way to Westminster.
So he left the barge, a procession marched before him with all the people, followed by 200 men, bearing in his hand the Queen's arms in form of a seal, but broader. Alex, if you'll pick up the thread.
Everybody whom they touch with them must follow them upon pain of death. Then followed a good number of men with white staffs, 16 trumpeters and 4 pipers. After these, 2 men, each bearing an incense box on a white staff, and then came the man with the sword, wearing a broad and high open cap of fur. Now followed the 2 mayors. Behind these, the council, in the same order as yesterday, but in red coats. The 2 burgomasters were clad in the same coats. Then followed 70 men with spears, clad at the expense of the burgomaster in blue coats and broad red caps, all of the same pattern, according to the English fashion. Now followed the whole population, entering the courthouse in a crowd, men as well as women, for the English women want to be present on all such occasions. Now that in Germany.
Lovely.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that. Everyone whom they touch with them must follow them upon pain of death. I mean, I assume it's an exaggeration on his part, but or someone told him that. You know, what is this thing going on here? Yeah, mate, if you have to follow pain of death, mate. Yeah.
Well, I assume there are people at the front of the crowd being like, "Ooh, pick me, pick me."
Yeah.
And the women, obviously.
Yeah, so
I think this is something that von Wedel has either made up or someone's told him.
Yeah.
It's just
no,
not really, mate.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird. I mean, I like it, but it's weird, and I don't know what's going on. So, yeah. Again, I think we can trust him on the costuming. You can scratch what I said just now. We got lots of detail about what they're wearing at that moment, and they're all entering the courthouse in a crowd, men as well as women. God. So, Liza, pick up how what it's like in the building.
Though the place was very large, there was no possibility to move. The burgomaster and the council mounted some steps and swore the oath to the Chancellor of State, who acted as the Queen's deputy. When this was over, I and my companions left the place, went down the river in a boat, and took our way to the town hall, where yesterday the mayor had sworn to the town. Here 60 tables were placed, each 15 or 20 paces long, all well arranged. Some steps higher up, some more tables were arranged in the same manner, and again a few steps higher, behind a curtain, we saw the mayor's table arranged in stately manner, where he was to sit with deputies of the Queen and council.
Yes, I like this. It was really, really busy, so I left. You know, so
Fair.
couldn't see anything. Stuff was happening. I've been to gigs like that. He's really keen on he likes detailing these really quite mundane things, but it's really great. 60 tables, 15 or 20 paces long, well arranged. You know, all these details.
These
Feels like he's
tables are-
asked someone as well, and that's where the deputies of the Queen and the Council will sit. He's like he's talking to someone in the room while he's making notes or something.
So the tables are in the town hall. Does he mean the Guildhall? Or?
Yeah,
I'd assume so. Yeah. Some of those terms he's using are not quite helpful.
And the mayor's table is behind a curtain, and it's the most awesome table.
Yeah. Okay, we've got more information. We're running out of text, I'm afraid. So and we haven't even got to what happens next. So he's still pootling about. Tracey, pick up mid-pootle, please.
Got the kitchens, right? Okay. We were conducted into 2 other rooms, 4 tables being placed in each of them. In the first, we found a great many young ladies dining. In the other, as many married ladies, many of them very fine-looking. After having seen this, we went to the kitchens. In the first kitchen, meat was roasting on 8 fires. In the second, only boiled dishes were prepared. In the third, pastry of different kinds was made. This banquet is arranged by the mayor. The expense of it is said to amount to £500. £1 being equal to 5 riksdaler. Afterwards, we took our way to the broadest street in London, which is Cheapside, by the way, through which the mayor passes on horseback from the courthouse, procession marching before him as aforesaid. But at the head of it, there are some fire engines ornamented with garlands, out of which they throw water on the crowd, forcing it to give way. The streets are quite filled with people.
So, yes, they've sent in the riot police. So yeah, there's some interesting things there. It's always nice to know what £1 being equal to 5 riksdalers. It's always good to have a currency exchange rate stated. That's useful. Yeah, he's really keen on the ladies eating in the other room. That's an interesting detail.
So what? Fire engines?
Yeah, I'm just going to put a picture up. Basically, they have some of the crowd control, and they are carrying squibs, which are actually like fireworks, and they sort of spray the kind of the fireworks out to get people out of the way. So the guy that I've just sent you a picture of, you can see he's carrying a squib, and he's also a green man costume, and that's what they would be doing.
That would be your that'd be your whiffler.
So wait, he's meant to be spraying fireworks, or he's meant to be spraying water?
Yeah, fireworks. Fireworks are coming out. It's called a squib, coming out of the thing he's carrying.
In the Promos and Cassandra scenes that I talked about before we started recording, they're directed to be 2 people dressed as green men with clubs of fireworks, and I had no idea what that would look like, and now I do.
Yes. But it's the addition of water as well. The fire, throw water on the crowd. Is that a confusion? I mean, surely he can't have confused that, can he?
It's possible. I've never seen any reference to water being used, unless this was a particularly unruly year, and they decided they needed to kind of bring every possible thing in. Again, sometimes with these eyewitness accounts from people who aren't from this country, you get the sense that they're trying to make sense of what they can see and kind of make equivalents to what they know at home, and sometimes they get it a bit wrong.
Well, it's also the mayor passes on horseback from the courthouse, and I'm sort of wondering what. I suppose that would be Westminster, won't it? So he would have arrived at the just below St Paul's, made his way up.
He's coming back from the Guildhall after the feast.
Oh, so this is after the feast.
I think so. Unless no, maybe not. But he's coming on Cheapside.
I'm just wondering whether Wedel has just muddled up the order of things here. I'm just because he's been too busy at the feast and he's taking this from other people's accounts.
Yeah, I think it's not, the chronology is not altogether clear, but he's clearly, when he goes on to talk about the pageantry in the next paragraph, that's the kind of the middle part of the day, if you like, after Westminster.
Yeah.
So probably on Cheapside as well, I'd imagine, given that he hasn't said he's gone anywhere else. So yeah, we're jumping ahead a bit.
Yeah, we're sort of jumping ahead, but we're also sort of jumping back. So it's that confusing thing. It'll become a little clearer when we actually go through the text of the pageant itself and we can talk more about the mechanics and the direction of travel. But yeah, some interesting questions thrown up there. So we're getting to the pageanty bit, shall we say? The theatrical moment. Greg, would you like to read this? Pay attention, everyone. There will be questions later.
Came a person sitting on a fine horse, head, neck, and body being covered with blue taffetas. Then followed 7 flag bearers. 2 flags were long, 5 almost like standards, though of a somewhat different cut. And after these, a military banner, followed by some trumpets. After the trumpets, some men were carrying a representation in the shape of a house, with a pointed roof painted in blue and golden colours, and ornamented with garlands, on which sat some young girls in fine apparel, one holding a book, another pair of scales, the third a sceptre. What the others had, I forget.
Which does suggest he was actually there.
I love that last line, that's brilliant.
Well, it's also, we're getting a sense of his interests in life, on which sat some young girls in fine apparel.
Costume and the girls, basically.
He does keep mentioning the ladies. It has to
But
be
do you know what's extraordinary? I've looked up Lupold von Wedel because I'm now totally engrossed in him and fascinated in him. And he didn't marry until the age of 54, on the 13th of September, 1598. So it took him a long time to settle on one lady.
How old was his wife? That's what I wouldn't know.
Well, from this, it suggests that he's been horny for quite a while.
I love the description of the flags too. That sort of all the different lengths. It wasn't just there were 5 flags, 7 flags. Sorry.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting actually comparing some of these details. So, it seems that, yes, he was there watching, but he wasn't paying nearly as much attention as he was to who was cooking what in the kitchen and what people were wearing earlier. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he'd been drinking. Who knows? Alex, would you read the next paragraph, please?
Yes. Now came the burgomaster and the council, in the same manner as I have already described, on beautiful and well-ornamented horses, with the guard, trumpets, and pipes, followed by the multitude, fine-looking women among it, which was wonderful to be seen. Thus the mayor entered the council house and held banquet.
Sorry.
I'm sure it was wonderful. It was von Wedel. Yes, it was. I'm sure you were delighted. Yes. Okay. Final paragraph, please.
This done, he went to St. Paul's Church with his suite, making procession round the church while hymns were sung and candles borne before him, after which they conducted him with trumpets and music out of the church. This is the way in which they here elect and confirm their burgomaster or mayor, who is afterwards knighted by the Queen's commissioner. As long as his office lasts, he is obliged to keep open house and free table for everybody, and this makes a great difference between him and the burgomasters in Germany. He and his wife have the title my lord and my lady, as long as they live.
Okay, Tracey, how much of that is true? Because I question a lot of that.
No, it's true. The bit about the free table and an open house is definitely true. It was what was called an office of charge, being Lord Mayor. It's one of the reasons why the city built Mansion House in the 18th century, actually, to make it a bit easier for the Lord Mayor to manage all the banquets and things, to have a kind of, proper venue. So the city also spent a bit of money decorating and doing up the Lord Mayor's house to enable him to be able to use it for these kind of events. In 1621, the Lord Mayor, Michael Francis Jones, a haberdasher, actually scarpered just before his term was up because he basically ran out of money. That doesn't happen very often, but these men were usually extremely wealthy, so it wasn't a massive issue really. But yeah, that's definitely the case.
Does he and his wife have the title of my lord and my lady?
Well, he's knighted, so yes.
Excellent. So I like that. And so we've got to the end of the element. So they do actually go back to St. Paul's after feasting, don't they? So that element is Is that correct?
He's just done that. They go held banquet, then they go for the sermon.
Yeah, I'm just checking his chronology, so that bit seems right.
Yeah, and then the Lord Mayor's usually accompanied by whoever's still standing back to his house with more kind of frolics right at the end of the day.
Okay, that was rather fun. I enjoyed that. All those lovely ladies. So what we're going to now look at is the text that was printed of the device of the pageant, born before Wolstan Dixie. Before we read that, Tracey, anything about Wolstan Dixie that you can tell us briefly? Is he an interesting chap?
No, not really. Sorry. He's not as interesting as Peele, I'm afraid.
Okay, right. Well, we know from...
I put up, one of the pictures I put up a few back, one called 550 PNG, has got some rather weird 19th century versions of the Pageant devices for 1616 Lord Mayor's show, and you can see links with somebody riding it in the bottom right-hand corner. So that, that's the same kind of device Peele is using all those years before.
Yes, we're about to get more detail. But he, sadly, Wedel was not very detailed about what the pageant itself was like. But luckily, we have this text, which suggests some things. So let's start with the speech. Stage direction is lovely. A speech spoken by him that rid on a luzern, a lynx, before the pageant, apparelled like a Moor. So who wants to leap in with that? Alex, why don't you do the speech riding a lynx?
From where the sun doth settle in his way, and yokes his horses to his fiery cart, and in his way gives life to Ceres' corn, even from the parching zone, behold, I come, a stranger, strangely mounted, as you see, seated upon a lusty luzern's back, and offer to your honour, good my lord, this emblem thus in show significant. Lo, lovely London, rich and fortunate, famed through the world for peace and happiness, is here advanced and set in highest seat, beautified thoroughly as her state requires. First, over her a princely trophy stands, of beaten gold, a rich and royal arms, whereto this London evermore bequeaths service of honour and of loyalty. Her props are well-advised magistrates that carefully attend her person still. The honest franklin and the husbandman lays down his sacks of corn at London's feet, and brings such presents as the country yields. The pleasant Thames, a sweet and dainty nymph, for London's good conveys with gentle stream, and safe and easy passage what she can, and keeps her leaping fishes in her lap. The soldier and the sailor, frankly both, for London's aid are all in readiness to venture and to fight by land and sea. And this thrice reverent, honourable dame, Science, the sap of every commonwealth, surnamed mechanical or liberal, is vowed to honour London with her skill. And London, by these friends so happy made, first thanks her God, the author of her peace, and next, with humble gesture, as becomes in meek and lowly manner, doth she yield herself, her wealth, with heart and willingness, unto the person of her gracious queen, Elizabeth, renowned throughout the world, stalled and anointed by the highest power, the God of kings that with his holy hand hath long defended her and her England. This now remains, right honourable Lord, that carefully you do attend and keep this lovely lady rich and beautiful, the jewel wherewithal your sovereign queen hath put your honour lovingly in trust, that you may add to London's dignity, and London's dignity may add to yours, that worthily you may be counted one among the number of a many more careful lieutenants, careful magistrates, for London's welfare and her worthiness.
We'll just pause briefly there. So we got a little turned around when we were talking about the procession route earlier, because it wasn't quite clear from what von Wedel was doing. But this is the first element of pageant starting from around St. Paul's area, or from just coming off the boat, returning from Westminster, heading up to Cheapside, and Cheapside is our principal strip of action where things are happening. So it's a processionary route, and the procession seems to be led by or introduced to us with this riding chap on a lynx. There, am I about right on that, Tracey?
Yeah, I mean this was in the days when there was only one pageant, generally speaking, and you can see it's peripatetic, so it's conveyed around in front of or behind, I'm not sure, possibly in front of the Lord Mayor, and then they would stop at places on your wonderful tube map, and then there, things would happen there. But yeah, it's peripatetic. I've just put up on the thingy the original text actually from Peele, if you want to have a look at that.
And there will be links in the show notes so that you can follow along at home for these, because they are available online. So in a sense, this is setting up the second half of the text, because he's talking about the various elements who are about to stand up and speak and be cute in a moment. But it's all thoughts from the room, actually. I'm not going to tell you what to think. Why should I do that? How did you respond to it? Alex, you were reading it. How did it feel to you?
I think it's a really nice speech. It's really well written compared to sort of what you get at some civic events these days. It's kind of, it feels like it's had some genuine thought put into it. It's, I love the sort of, I'm not a big fan of London itself, I have to admit, but I sort of love the imagery of kind of the different sort of contributors all contributing to London as the sort of centre of, as the centre of Britain with Elizabeth, or England with Elizabeth in the middle of it. And I sort of like it as a preamble to sort of what we're about to get. It's nicely written. It was more poetic than I was expecting from some piece of sort of civic.
Well, it's an interesting step up, I think, from the stuff with the royal entries we were looking at last time, which were much patchier and much simpler. This is doing something a bit different. Liza, you were there last time, I think. Thoughts on this one as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, Alex is absolutely right. As a sort of master of ceremonies speech, it's structured really well. It makes me eager to see how they would have costumed these actors. I certainly would like to see what Lady Science would be wearing. Oh, speaking of which, small text note, I've scrolled down a little bit, and below Science's speech, the first nymph speech, I'm pretty sure that should be "These holy lights shall burn."
It should be. Yes, that should have been corrected as well. I don't know why you've got that. I apologise for that. There's more than one bum available. So just point out that is a typo that should have been corrected. I don't know why you've got that. Oh well, never mind. I don't know why I try and keep track. I don't know why I keep track, because I'm obviously failing.
It's a nice thing at the end as well of the kind of the reciprocity that you may add to London's dignity and London's dignity may add to yours. It's very sort of it's very civil, I think, in the best possible sense of that word.
Now the question is the person sitting on the lynx the person sitting on a fine horse covered in blue taffetas, or is that just part of the procession that von Wedel mentioned earlier?
The horse sounds really specific. I mean, I think it's the horse that's covered in blue taffetas. The horse is wearing a kind of footcloth, and I think if you had something as badass as a lynx to ride on, then I don't think you'd cover it in cloth. Show me a cat who would stand for that, real or stuffed.
Yeah, I'm just working the assumption he missed this bit, and that's just somebody else's horse.
You have a look at the cover of my book, Rob. If you've got that to hand,
Yes.
There is very similar. And Peele also uses a presenter character who's a Moor riding on lynx in one of his plays at the same time. So
they had a lynx.
Yeah, well, but there's a lot of crossover between the plays that he's doing for the Queen's Men, obviously, and the stuff he's doing for City. Yeah.
I wonder if the lynx belonged to the Queen's Men. I wonder if the city paid them a higher fee for their prop lynx or something.
I think what play that was, because I'm sure we've done all.
Can't remember off my head.
Yeah, because I'm sure we've done almost all of them. So I'd have thought we'd come across it, and I thought I would have noted it. We were noting dragons earlier and things and possible overlaps. Yeah, so it's a construction. It's on top of construction. It's not pulled by horses or anything. I'm just wondering who the horse he's talking about in that particular bit was.
The person on a horse sounds like a person of actual high status, whereas the person on the lynx is almost certainly a professional actor.
I would have thought so. And when we're talking about professional actors, that's am I fair in saying that that's probably a bloke, as in an adult, as opposed to who are performing the next sequence, because the people who he was talking about, it does state here, spoken by the children in the pageant. So on the various houses, I suspect, if we're going by what Wedel said, on which sat some young girls in fine apparel, one holding a book, another pair of scales, and a third a sceptre. Whether that is connected directly with what is being said here, we shall see in a moment. So, children in the pageant, Liza first as London, Tracey, and then Greg, and we'll just circle round with all of these lovely children. So, London first.
New Troy I hight, whom Lud my lord surnamed. London, the glory of the western side. Throughout the world is lovely London famed, so far as any sea comes in with tide, whose peace and calm under her royal queen have long been such as like was never seen. Then let me live to carol of her name, that she may ever live and never die. Her sacred shrine set in the house of fame, consecrate to eternal memory, my peerless mistress, sovereign of my peace. Long may she joy with honor's great increase.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Tracey as Magnanimity.
Magnanimity. Country and the Thames afford their aid, and careful magistrates their care attend. All English hearts glad and well apaid, in readiness the London to defend. Defend them, Lord, and these fair nymphs likewise, that ever they may do this sacrifice.
And Greg as Loyalty.
The greatest treasure that a prince can have doth lovely London offer to her queen, such loyalty as like was never seen, and such as any English heart can crave.
And Alex as The Country.
For London's aid, the country gives supply of needful things and store of every grain. London, give thanks to him that sits on high, had never town less cause for to complain, and love and serve the sovereign of thy peace, under whose reign thou hast this rich increase.
Liza the Thames.
With silver glide my pleasant streams do run, where leaping fishes play betwixt the shores. This gracious good hath God and kind begun, for London's use with help of sails and oars. London, rejoice, and give thy God the praise, for her whose highness lengthens thy happy days.
And the Soldier, Tracey.
Armour of safe defence the soldier hath, so lovely London carefully attends, to keep her sacred sovereign from scath. Okay? That all this London land so well defends, and so far London bids her soldiers go, as well may serve to shield this land from woe.
And the Sailor, Greg.
The sailor that in cold and quaking tide the wrathful storms of winter's rage doth bide, with streamers stretched prepares his merry bark, for country's wealth to set his men a walk, that queen and country easily may see the seaman serves his prince in his degree.
And Alex, Science.
For London's safety and her happiness, the soldier and the sailor may you see, all well prepared and put in readiness, to do such service as may fitting be. And art with them doth join, and they with me. London then joy, and let all ages know what duty to thy sovereign thou dost owe.
And now we have 4 nymphs, one after the other. Shall we? Liza, nymph number 1, please.
Thus with the morning sun and evening star these holy lights shall burn. The cheerful flame with sweetest odor shall perfume as far as India stands in honor of her name, whose trophy we adore with sacred rites, with sweetest incense and with endless lights.
And nymph number 2, please, Tracey.
So long as sun doth lend the world his light, or any grass doth grow upon the ground, with holy flame our torches shall burn bright, and fame shall bruit the golden trumpet's sound, the honour of her sacred regiment that claims this honourable monument.
And third nymph, Greg.
Our holy light shall burn continually, to signify our duties to her state, whose excellent and high and princely majesty approves itself to be most fortunate.
Fourth nymph, Alex.
Virtue shall witness of her worthiness, and fame shall register her princely deeds. The world shall still pray for her happiness, from whom our peace and quietness proceeds.
And then there's an additional note that verses written under the arms of England, and Liza, I'll be mean and hand that to you.
Good Lord. Tracey, how's your Latin? I might nominate.
Terrible.
Okay, then I will read it in my terrible Latin, and everyone can laugh. Galaia victa dedit flores invicta leones Anglia, jus bellae in flore leone sum. O sic, o semper ferat Anglia leta triumphus, inclita galorum flore leone suo.
Lovely, and that's done by George Peele, Master of Arts in Oxford, and that's the text that we get. It is not as extensive as we will get much later on. As we go into the 17th century, we start getting quite a lot of text and a lot more data in a sense. How is everyone finding that? I am yet to identify the young girls holding books, scales, and a scepter, but did anyone else manage to detect any of them in there?
Nothing. They would have been sort of devices that would have been easily recognisable. Nothing jumps out actually.
No.
They might have been the nymphs, possibly.
Yeah, I was focusing on the nymphs at the time, but I just couldn't see that it matched. Unless that, there might be other visual things going on that are not text connected, and that's what he saw. That he didn't really see this element at all.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. The images that I've just put up on the chat thing, by the way, is a very famous street view of Cheapside during a procession. And the second of the two edifices in the middle of the street, not the big one, the one behind it, is the Standard on Cheap. And the figure of fame at the top there, you can just about see there's a figure with a trumpet. I'm as sure as I can be that they are by the figure of fame, which was after the Pageant station while these features are going on. But they mentioned fame quite a few times.
Yes, and fame has a golden trumpet that she blows if you have a good reputation, and also a black one that she blows if your reputation is bad.
Yeah, well, their shoes on the Standard, so yeah, that's where they are, I'm sure.
That's a really lovely piece of specificity. I wondered if the scales and the sword and the books, I wondered if you might have got them out of order and whether, science might have the books, but
I'm wondering if it's all on one pageant, as it were. They're all for science, and he only saw one. That's sort of how I'm thinking it, because they're all quite connected. There's nothing really. Is there anything particularly royally anywhere? There's the scepter I wondered about. It's interesting. It's interesting.
Sorry, I keep chucking images at you, but there's a much better quality image of one of the pageant devices in 1616 shown. You can see there's a large number of figures on it. And they are carrying things. and they would doubtless have been children because otherwise it wouldn't be able to carry that number of individuals.
Yes, because the particular pageants that we're talking about here, they're not on carts with they're being carried, aren't they?
Carried by porters, yeah, most definitely.
So it's not like you've got weight here that has to be carried by brute force.
How many is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 figures, which is standard actually. No doubling, obviously. That's quite a lot of individuals for to be carried around the streets of London. So children obviously have great advantages there.
The disadvantage, of course, when you're doing a large-scale event with lots of explosive devices going on and lots of music, is nobody could hear the buggers a lot of the time.
Well, it depends what instruments you use. There are specifically loud instruments for parades and public places. Woodwinds, reeds, brass, shawms, trumpets, things that go honk. And drums, of course.
Well, Wedel does seem to go for the honking. Mostly he's describing trumpets and pipes. Any additional thoughts about just the text that we've just had? Lovely London, lovely. It's lovely. It's London.
It's very harmonious. The picture Peele is painting here, actually. Certainly, when you get later into the 17th century, you get a lot more. Warning the Lord Mayor, it's going to be damn hard, and he's sort of watching out for people trying to bribe and that kind of stuff. You don't get any sense of that. It's all the loveliness of lovely, isn't it?
Yes, and I love the thought of these lovely harmonious verses being spoken among a crowd that's basically like barfing down each other's trousers.
Yes, we haven't had mention here. I mean, last time when we were in Coventry, the wine was flowing from the conduits quite excessively. Is that happening in Lord Mayor shows as well? Do we not get that?
The Royal Entry. You would have come to the Royal Entry, okay? He would be alive in 1558. We have to wait to 1604. Sorry.
Oh well, never mind. I'd like different. And many thanks to Gregory Musson, Alex Scott Fairley, Liza Graham, and Professor Tracey Hill for their reading and discussion of those texts. All our exploring sessions on civic pageantry is available on our YouTube channel, and other Lord Mayor stuff can be found on the podcast and our website. Links in the show description. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not buy us a coffee on Ko-fi.com or become a patron and get early access and bonus material. Go to patreon.com/Beyond Shakespeare. Links in the show description.